All right, welcome back. We are Game 3004, that's Mobile Game Dev 2, and the winter 2022 semester at George Brown, and it's week 9, part 1 of our broadcast. Yes, we will. The question I just had was, will we be going over saving and loading this week? And we will. I'm going to do that this week. That's exactly what I'm going to do. So welcome back. We are sitting here, and this week's release is the alpha release. It's going to be due, again, the end of the week, week 9, with 10% of your final grade. Along with that comes a peer review. Again, that's also due. This is like the third peer review you guys are doing. So far, marked everything, so I think I'm up to date with everything. I think most teams are doing very well. At this stage, the alpha and beta releases and the final releases, I have to tell you, are a little bit more challenging in terms of getting everything ready to go. And I'll be talking about the beta release requirements today that are going to be due in a few short weeks, week 12. Okay, so that's coming up. So we're sitting here at week 9, and we're talking about scriptable objects and how they tie into using something called player preferences or player prefs. Which is the way we're going to do saving and loading for both mobile and WebGL. That's what actually we're doing this week, along with everything else. So again, last week when we were together before the break, we had our project checkpoint. I think most teams did very well. Common questions that I asked you guys: how is your interface going to work with mobile? Most of you guys either had a mobile-first interface, which I was really happy to see, and or had a plan on how to incorporate something like that. And as well, what components are missing and not working, and what are you going to do to get those in place? Most people were able to either get them in place by the Sunday of the submission period, or if you didn't, then you were marked accordingly. This week, like I said, alpha release is due on Sunday. Your third peer review is due again also on Sunday. Again, other items that are due. The 8th weekly report is due next week. And your beta release is also due week 12. Okay, so that's what's coming up. So there is no weekly report this week because the thought was that you're going to be off last week. Usually the weekly report is the week prior, what you did kind of stuff. So I'm not going to make it happen this week to give you guys a break from that one thing. Usually that's how we started off in the second half of the semester anyway. So one thing that is something I haven't put on here is other things that are due is lab. I think I mentioned lab 5. Oops. So lab 5, which is this week, it's due on Saturday this week. So again, this is due Saturday at midnight. Okay, so I'm putting that in there because some kind of staggering things a little bit. So again, alpha release is due Sunday. Third peer review is due Sunday. Your lab 5 is due Saturday. So that's an individual thing that you're doing. Again, you can submit it any time before that if you want to. 8th weekly report due next week. Beta release due in week 12. So what are we doing for the lab this week? Again, see, I put to do this Saturday. We're going to convert our approach to mobile. That's one part of what we're going to be doing. We're also going to talk about mobile UI. We're going to use that little joystick pack again and talk about positives and negatives and how do you incorporate that thing. What's the difference of what we did when we created our joystick pack or used the joystick pack last semester, and how we can use it this semester to make it for mobile in 3D, and is that really practical? We're going to talk about those things, especially when you're moving things in kind of as a first person perspective or first person controller. How do you do that? So we'll go over that again. We're going to test with a mobile device as well, and we're going to talk about some optimizations in terms of textures, lighting, and those kind of things this week. I'm going to be talking about the Quest system. If I have time, what I'd like to do is actually build one with you. I don't think it's going to be possible to do that only because of the time frame we have. Again, we're going to be talking about some stuff today, and no Blender again. Notice that there's an absence of Blender because we've done as much as we can for the first half of the semester, and now when we need to, we'll pop in there, but it won't be kind of like half of the lab like we've been doing so far, right? Loading and saving game state. We're going to be talking about using scriptable objects to store an asset. and how to pass those the data that we pass into the object into something called player prefs. And player prefs is something we need to use because scriptable objects reset a lot of times state when you're using it on mobile devices, right? So it's not a great solution for mobile devices. It's okay for PC, as an example, or Mac, but not great for long-term storage, right? So that's something we can use between levels. This is great. If it's something you want to pass from one level to the other, scriptable objects is the way to go. Or if you want to set up a configuration, example, you want to create, if you want to use something like remappable keys or bindable, key bindings or whatever, scriptable objects might be a way you want to go with this, right? So you can kind of look at one item almost like a kind of a singleton in some ways for gathering data and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of saving, the biggest problem with this is that your game state or your application state is reset. And so we're going to be using player prefs, which is something that's built into Unity, nothing to download, which is pretty cool. So that is what our Lab 5 is going to entail this week. I just want to talk about quests really quickly. And I know that you guys have kind of touched upon quest system before, let's say, at least in passing, right? I'm not sure if did Joss cover it at all, or was it even brought up anywhere else? I'm not sure. Was it, guys? Maybe, maybe not. No. So really, let's talk about it then a little bit. So really, a quest, mission, or task, it's something that you get given. As an example, you were given by the system. A lot of times, we use quests in different ways, not just for you to do something in the game, but also from a tutorialization perspective. You can use quests, you can use quests for that kind of thing. So, so again, it could include special rewards that are linked to the quests when you complete the quest. You also may have some kind of dependencies. For example, you can't start one quest until you finish another one, or those kind of things. So quests are really cool in terms of making your game interesting. One thing that you want to kind of avoid are things like fetch quests. Go get me this, bring it back, I'll give you some loot, right? Or even kill quests. Go get this person, kill this animal or creature or boss, come back and I'll give you some loot. Those kind of things are okay in the beginning, as an example, but if you have a lot of those things, it becomes rather annoying, right, for that kind of stuff to happen. So quests are great to guide, especially in the beginning, characters to kind of go up levels and all that kind of stuff. I think this is a good thing. But on the downside, it really depends on how quests are formed. There's a whole discussion online on how to make quests and how they can be really, really bad. Okay, so let's just talk about it really briefly here, just as a discussion point, when it comes to quests. So think about this. Typically, quests, especially from a tutorialization, have something called a guide character. Right, so usually there might be a guide character in the game, whether you're creating a first-person shooter or some kind of a third-person perspective game, or even a tower defense game. There's a guide character that comes on a lot of times, and the guide character is either A, an NPC that you can use later on, or B, it's something that like a steward or something that's part of the game that kind of bring you into the universe. They're built with the same aesthetic in mind as the entire world typically, and they kind of guide you to through the first part of the game to get you set up with everything that you need to get going. Okay, so that's really what a guide character is, and guide characters are very, very common, but they need to be contextual with the aesthetic and the backstory of the game. Okay, so we'll talk about that a little bit. So again, kill quests, we talked about this, fetch quests, delivery quests, escort quests, all these kinds of quests are, kind of very, very common. And a lot of times, or either gather quests, to me, this can be really annoying if you have a lot of these. And a lot of times I feel like if I'm going to escort or kill or fetch or something like that, there's got to be enough variation in the quest itself, that you're not gonna be trapped to do that. Quests can fail as well. A lot of times, these quests, when you're given a quest to do, you're given an opportunity to explore the world, the game world itself, right? And a lot of times, quests are timed, right? You have X number of minutes or whatever. I'm thinking Borderlands. A lot of times, you have some time to get something done, and if you don't get it done on time, you fail the quest, right? As an example, or it might be something where you have a dependency. There's a group of quests that happen in order, and if you don't get it done, a lot of times for the main storyline, it happens like this, where you can unlock the quest by actually finishing the previous quest. One example of that is, in order for you to progress in the game or even move from the tutorial level, to the next level, even to start playing the game, I'm thinking like Apex Legends is a good example of that. There's a tutorial quest you've got to complete in Apex Legends, even now, in the current version of the current iteration of the game. And once you're done the tutorial quest, it unlocks the ability for you to play the rest of the game. A lot of times there's things like that happen. Even the current game, Elden Ring, has that kind of thing. You need to finish this one part of the game to get you going, and then afterwards, very quickly actually, with Elden Ring, it allows you to multi kind of play with other players together. They can enter your world, you can enter their world very, very quickly compared to other Souls-like games. And so that you have these dependencies, right? You have these quest dependencies. A lot of times, quests can be linked together, like we say, to create a series of quests or quest chains, which are kind of really cool. And a lot of types of quests are called these outside of the main quest. They're called side quests, all right, and that kind of stuff. So, and these are the kind of quests that deviate from the main plot and are not required to complete the game. A good example of that is, I'm thinking The Witcher is a great example of they have so many side quests in The Witcher 3. There's just so many of them, and you can spend like 200 hours of gameplay just doing your side quests and not even doing the main storyline. So it's kind of interesting. And I'm thinking about the same company, created our Project Red. CD Projekt Red created Cyberpunk 2077, and when I was playing that game, it's like a little bit more disjoint in terms of the stuff that they had. They had a lot of fetch quests in Cyberpunk 2077. In fact, that's one of the things I really didn't like. They also had a lot of quests that would open up, as an example, and they just kind of hung out there, and you can do them or not. And it reminded me a lot of other games that were like that for the most part. But to me, some of the most important quests that I think all games should have is some kind of tutorial quest. And again, we have this guide character that kind of brings you along. So again, to restate, quests are tasks which players can accomplish in order to get further in the game and receive some kind of reward. And a quest can contain a list of one or more tasks, right? Again, you might have an unlocking requirement, and in some cases, it's good to provide the players with a task cancellation. So how can you cancel the quest or deny the quest? Sometimes you'll have two possible endings, where you decide to support one faction, as an example, in the game over another, and one quest is immediately dead. It's not even available for you anymore. A whole quest line isn't available because you've joined a certain faction in the game, as an example, in the aesthetic of the game, where it actually opens up a whole new quest line and maybe a different story ending for other parts of the game. So again, really great in terms of, kind of amending. Yeah, example for me, Fallout and Borderlands are kind of great examples of that, right? So here's an example of a couple of different kind of snapshots or screenshots from. One is from Borderlands, the original Borderlands. And do you guys remember who was your guide character? Who was your guide character in the first part of Borderlands? You guys remember? Claptrap, absolutely. Claptrap also became your sidekick at some points or another. He would help you out, guide you from one place to the other. Sometimes he would even fight next to you in later iterations of the game, right? And again, this is the older version of how Apex Legends used to look. Again, notice that we have a bunch of these checkboxes. So from a UI perspective, one thing I like about the quests are, you have some kind of user interface that basically tells you the reward of completing the quest. You have another user interface system that basically is a checkbox that allows you to check mark what part of the quest you've completed. Okay, so that's kind of an important piece as well. And it kind of adds another element to the game. In mobile design, let's take it to mobile now. In mobile design, quests are, in my opinion, super important, because what they do is they get you to the next part of the game, especially if you include things like monetization and those kind of things. I think quests become almost like a must-have in mobile games, right? Even if, especially in the beginning when you're learning how to play the game, a lot of times they might have you must learn how to play the game in order for you to do it. One thing I like also is, especially if you've played a game like like in the same genre many times, like an example would be a puzzle game, a skippable quest, a skippable tutorial. You don't want to force your user to do the tutorial, as an example, because what that would do is allows the user to, if they're experienced, to kind of use the affordances that they can bring in from other games that they've played into this game. And sometimes that's okay if you want to say, do you want to skip, kind of thing. Or maybe you give them the basics that they have to complete so they know how to move around, fight in the game, and do whatever. And there might be an advanced tutorial that they can skip if they want to, or other additional tutorials that are optional. So I know a lot of other game systems do that as well. So it's really up to you how you want to present the quests. But I think, again, one of the most important parts of it is the tutorial quest. So again, I would say this is like a mandatory quest that you might have. Other types of task states, pending, some stuff that the task did not meet. I don't know why it says met. Did not meet the unlocking requirement yet. Unlocked. So the unlocking requirements are met. So you've unlocked the quest, but it is not in progress yet, maybe because of the limit of the possible tasks in progress. Maybe you have too many tasks in progress already, and you have to switch to a, maybe the current task or current quest you want to do if you have a lot of them in your game. In progress, the task was unlocked and shown to the player. It might be useful to have a substate or separate state for a new task. And basically what it does is it kind of states that the task is in progress, but the player did not read the objectives yet. I don't know what it says, objections. Wow, this is telling you the objectives yet. What the heck happened? I think this is what happens when I write, and it's pretty crazy, right? So in progress, and it did not get a separate state yet because it's UI specific. Yeah, that's important. It did not. Wow, it's really bizarre. That's rare that I have this problem. Completed. Task was in progress and player did everything necessary to complete it. And now it is time to collect the reward. If there is no reward, the task might directly switch to the next state. And there are also systems where quests autocomplete. All right, and that is example if you complete your tutorial, the autocomplete. That's a good example. Done is the task was completed and the user collected the reward. And canceled, this state is important if you want a quest to disappear. And it's particularly useful if you introduce new quests, which player where the player who advanced beyond a certain the player who advanced beyond a certain threshold won't see. And the reason why they won't see it is because they've gone too far, right? So they've taken a storyline in a direction where the quest makes no sense anymore, right? So I'll talk about some criticisms around this system in a second before we get into scriptable objects. And you guys have covered scriptable objects before, and some of you are already using them in your games, which are great. But let's talk about some criticisms about quests. Here's an example. In the old Witcher game, right? You're going to go and there's this, kind of helping the elf. There's an elf in a village, in a hut. And you go to the village, and the elf tells you, "Hey, Witcher, I have this. There's a wolf in the woods, and this is actually a topic of there's a GDC topic that's around this. There's a wolf in the woods, and could you kill him for me? Because he's being really annoying and all this kind of stuff. Because there's some people missing in the woods, and I think the wolf has killed them all, right? Something like that. So." There's a couple choices you have. You've So here's a state. You've learned about the wolf in the woods. Okay, here's an example. And you have choices now. It's unlocked because you've gone to the elf and you've talked to them for the first time, right? So it unlocks the ability for you to see the quest in the first place. Okay. What if you visited the woods ahead of time? You never went and saw the elf, but the wolf in storyline is in the woods. He's there. So, can you fight the wolf in the woods? Before you actually start, to go and see the elf? And the answer is a lot of times you can't in these kind of games, right? Here's another one. You kill the wolf and that you meet the elf, you kill the wolf in the woods, right? But you never come back to collect your quest. What ends up happening with that? You never get the reward, right? So that's a negative as well. Here's another one. You go to meet the elf, and the elf basically says, "Hey, look, there's a wolf in the woods." You go away and you come back and see him again, and he tells you, "Hey, you still haven't killed the wolf in the woods, right? Can you kill him? Because I'm really afraid he's going to mess us up." And eventually the elf gets tired of you and goes and fights the wolf himself, right? These kind of things don't really a lot of times happen in quests. And one of the biggest criticisms that quests have in general is that they are almost like a time capsule, right? So it's like, they just sit there waiting for you to do that part of the story. And a lot of criticism is like, why don't they just resolve on their own? If you don't get to that quest by a certain part of the game, that quest is no longer available to you. Or you can go to that part, whether you talk to the elf or not, and complete the quest, as an example. How many times have you gone to a place and it says, especially in Fallout, as an example, or some other games, and they say things like, you can't enter this room yet, right? You can't go there yet. You can't open this part yet. You can't do this thing yet. Why can't you, right? If you can do it later, how come you can't do it now, right? Because you haven't talked to the right character, right? But you made it to that part of the world. Why not just, why can't you approach the story from different angles? Well, because quests don't work like that, right? The standard quest is broken, and this is the criticism that a lot of game designers have. Don't make it so that quests are always something that you need to depend on. There's a huge dependency chain of unlocking one thing and completing another one. Some games, though, allow you to do that. They allow you to complete quests, and they say, "Hey, you completed this really cool thing. Here's an achievement." Even though you were never told about it, you went and did something in the game, and it made a difference. And here's something else to bring up. What about for those people when you're actually going in and playing the game and you complete the quest? As an example, how do people hear about you? Further down. No one knows that you completed that quest if you've never talked to anybody before. But sometimes you end up going back to a character like the elf in the hut in the village, and you say, "Look, here's the wolf's head. I've got the wolf's head. I cut it off. I picked it up, and here it is. I've got it here ready for you, even before you've asked me to do the thing." Right? It's kind of weird. So it's like, so quests are kind of, I don't know. There's a couple of schools on it. Some people really hate them. Especially, the example of Fallout 4. I always go back, a friend of mine, we always argue about it. I always thought the Fallout 4 engine was an improvement over Fallout 3, but worse story-wise, right? For him, everything sucked. It was like terrible. Bethesda just failed with Fallout 4. This is what he was talking about. And the reason for it is because now you've become this carpenter in Fallout 4. Somehow you're going to be able to create these, these bases and everything else. And that's your main thing. And also, you've got to run from one of these settlements to the next, to fix the problem. Sometimes the problem is in the settlement you're currently in, which is also weird. Hey, you better help us out. And as soon as you go and talk to somebody in the settlement, because you get a warning that the settlement needs help, as an example, once you start going there, suddenly these super mutants appear out of nowhere, and they're coming at you. They almost literally just appear out of nowhere. They don't run from someplace. They spawn, right? And you're like, wait, where do these guys come from, right? It doesn't make any sense. And so it kind of takes the, that I want to be the savior of the settlement thing to the next level. And it almost becomes repetitive and boring, right? And the first couple times you're okay with it, but afterwards, it's just another kill quest or an escort quest or a protect quest. It's one of those kind of things. And it's not really inventive at all, right? So making these randomized quests appear is cool in a way because it adds some randomized content, but really bad if the same place that you just helped asked you to help them again, and you're still there. You haven't gone anywhere, right? Which is really messed up. So that's like a level of care that Bethesda didn't take at that time, and that's why he complains a lot. He's like, I hate that. That's the worst company ever. They've made the terrible games, right? And to me, it's not like that. I know that Fallout 76 is a big kind of nail in the coffin for him when it came to that kind of stuff. But it's the same with many systems. I mean, think about Destiny, right? Destiny 2. When you're learning how to, you've got the tutorial quest and you need to complete it. There's no other way to get your powers or to unlock your abilities or whatever unless you complete it. Some people hate that. They're like, wait, I've played Destiny before. I know how to do this kind of stuff. Why do I need to go through this whole tutorial thing again, right? Well, there's a reason for it, because the developers Bungie wants you to kind of explore the world and get into that, and also understand the things that you can't do without buying one of their packs, right? So it's kind of an interesting way of doing things. So that's kind of the the criticism. There's some criticism around quests. I think personally, for me, this is my opinion, quests are a good thing for a video game, especially for the tutorial side. There might be some stuff you want to skip. I think it's okay to allow some pieces of the tutorial to not be mandatory, that you can skip through. I think that's a good thing. It gives players more agency in terms of the way they do stuff, so that's a good thing. I think a main storyline is also a very good quest to complete. It kind of carries you through, and actually, if you want to tell a story, if that's part of the reason why you're making this game, and I think adding narrative elements to any game is awesome. That's a really great thing to do. Side quests are okay as long as they make sense. And one of the things that I always say is, and that I'd like to develop one day, if I was going to do kind of a big storyline myself, is what about how does the player's passage in the world make a difference? How does the player's passage, whether they do something bad or do something good, how does it affect the final story? And I think there should always be kind of an end effect to your influence in the game itself. If you do bad things, if you, rob a village or, kill people that are NPCs, and that should be allowed, in my opinion. It should be tough, but it should be allowed. If you want to go and do that, then your game should change. The way the ending is going to be should change. You shouldn't be able to run away and come back and then they like you again, or the NPC you killed is alive, or there should be NPCs that are unkillable. That to me, again, is something that is again, Bethesda does that a lot, and a lot of other games do that too, where you can't kill an NPC no matter what you do. You can knock them out and everything else, but you can't kill them. Why? So these are the kind of things that you can think about. Right? You kill something, there should be an effect for you. All right, so that is task states and quests in general. So let's think about things that you need for a quest. You need a user interface, okay? Some kind of user interface that's going to show you what the next task is going to be. And how are you going to store those tasks and the actual quest itself? The quest is made up of a series of tasks. I need to do A, B, C, D, whatever they are. And I need to do them sometimes in an order. I need to do A before I do B, before I do C. A lot of times you can do any of those tasks at any time you want. For example, kill 3 wolves, as an example. That might be something. Again, a good example of that would be something like in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. You might have to kill a certain number of things. Collect this many resources. Killing wolves and collecting resources have no dependency chain, right? So you should be able to do those things, right? And there might be a bunch of little things you need to do, so that way you satisfy the requirements of the person or NPC or whatever that gave you the quest itself in the first place. All right, so that's pretty cool. And then when you complete the quest, some kind of quest reward, right? So all these things need to be bundled into a system. And what better thing to help us with those systems but scriptable objects? Scriptable objects are a great way to document your quests, to have all the stuff that you need there, and you can modify the points and everything else. You can create a system where you have a series of tasks that you have to complete, and you can put that kind of in there. Yep. FromSoft. You can't kill those NPCs, man. They don't exist. Good luck. Try and kind of hit somebody in the rest area in a FromSoft game. You're gonna get it. It's just terrible. Don't do it. And you can do it by accident too, by the way. All right. So scriptable objects we know about. You guys have been using scriptable objects in your games since you were with Joss. They're great. What they allow us to do is create an asset that we can use in the game. We create a scriptable object class is what it is. And that class itself, we create instances that we save as assets, as an example, in the game itself. Okay, so which is pretty cool. So every time we instantiate the prefab, it will get its own copy of the data, which is pretty cool as well. And again, this could be something like where I want to pick up an item or something like that. That item will be picked up. It's very similar when it comes from a memory perspective to a singleton, where we have a single piece of information that's going to store something that we can access over and over again. So that's where scriptable objects are really cool. And I think it kind of combines nicely with the quest system. And again, this is a great example of stuff they show us in Unity where the main use cases for scriptable objects are saving and storing data during the editor session. This is a good one. Saving data as an asset in your project to use at runtime. Okay, this is important. Inventory systems, a great place to store, kind of stats about an item. As an example, where there's the description, the cost, the attack damage, all those kind of things you want to store that are outside of the game itself, where they're not hard-coded, but you can read from them. And sometimes it's a lot easier than having it hard-coded in a game, because imagine you have to search through your scripts to figure out what that item is. This is just an actual asset that you can go in there and modify, which is pretty cool. Quest systems is the other one. Okay, so that's why I put them in here. Those are the use cases. There's some great tutorials for this. You guys have seen some of these before, and I've kind of put a few tutorials up here that you can access as well. Alongside with scriptable objects, in my opinion, is a great little tool called Player Prefs. And there is a link for Player Prefs up on Unity. Player Prefs, the way they work is you can store a string, a float, and an integer value into your player preferences, and they tie nicely together with scriptable objects. So for example, I want to set strings, set floats, set integer values with your, your player preferences, which is pretty cool. And so the way it would work is if I want to save something, right? I want to look at, let's say, player data, and I want to save my player data as an example. I can, save to preferences. And the way save to preferences might be something like, hey, player preferences, I want to set a float to whatever it's going to be. And after I'm done, I want to use the player preferences.save method. Guys, I'll be right back. I'm just being interrupted. I'll be right back. 1 second. Bear with me. So sorry. 1 sec. And here we go. And I apologize. Sorry, someone at the door today. All right. Don't know why, but they came at this time. Here we go. So that's what player preferences are. And they're great because one thing we need to use is, and I apologize about the delay, you cannot simply use scriptable objects with mobile devices and the WebGL platform. And they save this information in different spots. So just as a bit of reference, here's the reference. I'm just going to put this inside of your chat for a second for player preferences. So what they have is a bunch of static methods. So I want to store something. I can use the SetFloat method if I want to store floats. I want to set integers and or set strings. Those are the way that I can save them to player preferences. And then what I can do is I can get them, right, the same way. So there's setters and getters for those things. Notice that there are no more complex objects than that. Just floats, integers, and strings. Those are the primitives that you can use. And you can do a couple things. You can check if an object has a key. So if the player preferences includes an object that you want to store, as an example, you can delete that object. And then finally, when you write the object to a disk, right, or to your player preferences, you need to use the save method. Let's talk about the set method. If I go set float, there is an example of how this works. And the way it works is like this. Okay, so you go public void set float as an example. And what you want to do is you want to set a key name and a value. So key value pairs. And this is the exact same way that you would store something, as an example, on the web in different places. Let's take a look at that for a second. If I go Control-Shift-J here on this page, you can see that inside of any web page, we have a couple of things we can store. We have local storage, which is right here. And we also have something called session storage, which is right here as well. So local storage, notice that there are a couple of key value pairs that are stored in our local storage. And local storage is something that persists from one session to the next, by the way. So it stores stuff like, hey, what is my language that I'm looking at? So docs lang, right, is in English, right? Script lang is CS, that's what it says. There we go. So that's C#. And I'm showing you this because this is an exact same way. These key value pairs are the same way that you would store, player prefs, as an example, inside of your application. This key value pair idea where you can store strings, integers, and floats. Now here on the web, what they do is they don't use local storage. They use something called indexed DB. Okay, and we can take a look at that. If I go back in that one page, it kind of tells you the way that they kind of store things, in different platforms. So one of the things is you can see that on Windows, player preferences are stored in a specific spot in the registry. Okay, which is interesting. On Android, they're stored in an XML document, okay? And on WebGL, they're stored in an indexed DB, right? A database that's using the browser's IndexedDB API, and they store it in that one spot that we talked about. So they're literally stored in a specific location, as an example as well. But this player prefs works pretty much for all platforms. There's some place that everything is being stored, within. And again, what you want to do is you want to be able to check to see if your storage location or your platform has that key. You can check to see what it is, because remember, what we're going to do is when we set float, we're going to give a friendly name to that key. For example, I want to store player strength. What's the value of my player strength? Well, it's going to be whatever that is. And then I can check to see what the player strength value is when I get that float information back out again. Okay, so this is kind of a very simple way of getting it done. And they've given you some examples here as well, like character health, 60.5. You store that, and then you can recover that later on. It's a very quick and easy way to save and record stuff, and then store this stuff back inside of a scriptable object. One thing you don't want to always do is do a lot of reading and writing into player preferences. A lot of times we want to use player preferences when you're leaving the game. As an example, if you're putting the game into background mode, as an example for Android and iOS devices, you don't want to do this all the time. I'd recommend use scriptable objects to go from one level to the other, as an example. And then when you load the level, or when you're at a certain point in time, every so often, that's why it's not done all the time, you would save your game state sometimes automatically to player prefs. And you should be able to set that in an option somewhere. You can say, well, I want to save every 5 minutes, or I want to save every 2 minutes, whatever. But it shouldn't be every frame. Please don't do something crazy like that. It'll really slow your system down. Writing to this kind of dictionary, which is what these things are, is very slow. Okay, so be careful about this. All right, questions around scriptable objects. You guys have already known about them and how they tie into something called player prefs. A very easy and simple way to store stuff for your mobile games. And I know this is one of your requirements, for this release. So this is going to give you some information. We're going to do some of this on Thursday when we're together. And I'm hoping to get some of that Quest stuff done. So again, no tech today so far, but I'm talking about the theory behind it. I'm giving you all the details so that you can get going on it. So when we meet on Thursday, we can be pretty productive. Let's think about a couple more things before we move on. From a Quest item perspective, let's think about this for a second. I got a Quest itself, and I need different tasks for you to complete that quest, right? Here's an example. How would you implement this thing? If I had a quest, like a tutorial quest as the beginning, and I wanted to, one of the main quest items in a tutorial is, for example, in Apex Legends, is how to move around, right? How to move around, how to jump, how to crouch, how to do all those things. And it's the same thing when it comes to many games, like, for example, Borderlands did the same thing. Crouch underneath here, jump over here, crawl on top of here, climb up top of there, fire your weapon, collect this thing. And so some of them are really simple. If you get to a point and that part of the quest is activated, it depends on you being in a specific location for it to be there. So to kind of activate or unlock that item. Is it unlocked or not by, from the beginning? And if it's not unlocked, what is the unlockable condition? What is that thing that you need to do? Is it a position? Is it an item that you need? What is it that you need to do to unlock that item? And how do you complete it? Those are the kind of things you have to think about. How do I create a quest system where once I've performed that action, then your quest system knows that you've completed it? Can anyone think of a way? So let's say, for example, you're training a person on how to use your game, right? And it's your mobile game. How do you do it? And again, one thing we want to do is we want to use player preferences for this because we want to be able to save our game state. One of our game states is, guess what? They've completed the quest, right? So we load the game again. We don't have to do that whole tutorial again. It's already done, right? That would be terrible if you've finished the game or you've played, half an hour of the game, as an example. You've played and then your game crashes or something like that, and then you got to do that tutorial again. That would be horrendous, terrible, right? So how do you mark it so that how do you come to the point where you activate a quest? Let's think about this. Let's say you want to show someone how to move around your game world. How do you do that? Let's think about the best practices. A guide character. And if you look up what a guide character might look like, if I look up guide character, right, in general, right, and let's take a look at images of guide characters, right? There's a bunch of different ones that you can use in different games. Right? Obviously, this is not a great reference, but you can look at someone like Claptrap. Claptrap is the guide character for Borderlands, right? And what he does is he kind of runs you along and basically says, this little robot basically says, hey, come this way, and then do this thing, right? And then when you do it, like follow me. He kind of says that a lot. Follow me. Come this way. So having a guide character, kind of move from one part of the, of the game world to the other, you can use nav mesh data for this, where you basically give your guide character a target for that part of the level so that, when they go there, they're waiting for you. And then they're waiting for you to get there. When you get there, it unlocks the next part of the quest, which is, okay, now duck, now jump, now pick up this item. And you can associate very specific things to make sure that they unlock that quest. So there's an unlockable piece, as an example, and when you get there, then it satisfies that quest requirement. again, you want to have some on-screen user interface to show that the quest is active, and you want to give your player outside of the mandatory tutorial quest a chance for it to be canceled. Okay, so pretty straightforward best practices. All right, that's it for me for today. Any questions around quests, scriptable objects, and player preferences, and how they can help you with your current release? We get together. Yeah, go.
Specific game state snapshot, which is like I kind of presume that we have to save like every part of the level, so like all the character positions, all like
Yeah.
Like in the whole game. So we would save what levels the player has unlocked and like their scores per level kind of thing. But so I just wanted so we do need to do like a game state snapshot.
I mean, to me, I would say yes. So the reason why I would say yes is this, right? Like, so let's suppose I'm playing your game, and remind me again of your particular game.
With terrific players, so
Right. So tower defense. So again, what you're doing with the tower defense game is, what if you've collected X number of resources? You definitely want to keep that as a snapshot, right? What have you completed? What level you're on? If you have XP or anything like that? What experience points have you earned? Any other thing that you've done? If you've already gone to a bunch of waves, let's say for example you're on wave number 3 of that particular level, and there's like 2 more waves to go. These are all things that you want to capture. You want to capture the state of the game. So when we say capture the state of the game world, it can mean, in your case, kind of how far you've gone. Do you know any easy ways to save and load animations? Okay, I'll answer in a second. Did that answer your question, Chris?
Yeah, someone. I'm actually asking with Herman because it was something we talked about like in our last meeting when we were going over. We're running into trouble like having to save every piece of information on levels, like all the projectiles that are like currently fired.
No.
Save and everything.
No. Well, I mean, it really depends on. I don't think I would calculate the projectiles being fired. There's going to be some stuff that can't be saved, right? Things that can't be saved, just the same as if you're playing a multiplayer system, is you can't save. You can't reproduce, for example, particle systems. That's just not plausible. Doesn't make any sense. So anything like, if it's something that's been activated, you definitely want to save that. Any activations, deactivations, enablement, disablement, if you've destroyed enemies or whatever you've done, like if it's this is general talk I'm talking about, not just in your game, but any game. If you've gone to a certain place or you made it to a certain checkpoint, all those things should be saved, right? Like what checkpoint are you at right now, or the current checkpoint. But things like animation states, the only way that you would save animation states is if you're in the middle of some kind of transaction or transition and you want to show that next. And I don't see that is an important save state, right? To me, I don't think you should save. Like, what animations are you thinking about saving, Herman? No, you don't need that. That should be part of the animations, the enemy themselves. I don't expect you to, if you save your game in the middle of an attack, that's also something you can do. You can also make conditions where you can't save the game in the middle of a transaction. You can have to say, okay, if you're in the middle of a transaction, you got to finish the transaction, then you can save, kind of thing. Pausing the game in the middle of an attack, that's okay. But saving the game in the middle of an attack may not be something you want to allow. Maybe you might say, you got to finish this. If you stop the game now, you'll lose your progress. They say that too, right?
That's like sort of what I was like talking about before. It's like we would want like the player to play like one whole level in the game, like I guess one sitting. Like they wouldn't be able to leave a level in progress.
Yeah, and I think that's up to you. Like that makes sense to me, right? Because if some games will make you play the entire level. Now, if the level is only one wave, okay. But what if the level is like 20 waves? Right? You got to go through 20 waves again to save. It's too long, right? So you got to figure out that every 2 to 5 minutes, you should give a player a chance to save. Something like 2 to 5 minutes, right, of gameplay. So if it takes you 2 minutes to finish off a level, what do they lose if they exit the game? 2 minutes? It's okay, right? But if they lose 20 minutes of play, well, then you got to consider that might be a place where you need to save more often, right? So, because no one wants to lose 20 minutes of gameplay. That could be a lot, especially like in a Souls game. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Right. So not that you can save much in a Souls game anyway. You save like when you get to the fire or something, right? But or camp or whatever you're going to get to, whatever they call it these days in Elden Ring. So, but yeah, I think I'm gonna leave that to you. As long as there's that element, and I'm not going to force you to. I didn't tell you how often you're able to save, but you should be able to tell the player that they're not able to save yet. They got to save at the end of the level, or they got to save. If saving is available, either you make it so that it's automatic, right, like a auto save, or if they want to save at the end of the level, they can do that. But you got to let them know. Yeah, you can do that. You can say, all right, do you want to save your progress, right? Or, maybe they want to save their progress and go back, right? They want to go back to the previous level, and it should be at a different save slot. I agree. Yeah, I think they should allow you to do that, Liam, for sure. But one thing to note is whenever you save, so this is another thing when it comes to saving and loading, when it comes to player preferences, remember that player preferences, it doesn't talk about a save slot or a load slot or anything like that. It's not like there's a million slots. You have one set of player preferences you can use. So you have to be creative on how you do it. Okay. So some people, what they do is they append, for this to create save slots and load slots, right? They create a save slot name, as an example, and that save slot name is going to be associated with all the other things. So it's almost like they append a prefix, as an example, to all of their, to all of their preferences that they're saving. So let's go back to that 1 second. This is the way they do it, right? So key name could be whatever key name you want. So a good example is you might have the key name that you want to store, and you can call it whatever you like. So it could be the name of your save slot, in the beginning, save slot, whatever, and then whatever property you want to save after that, right? So that's a way that people keep track of the save slots. And you might have a number of different save slots with some limitations on how many you can have. I recommend, something like, remember that there might be a lot of that, right? Jinx says, was about to ask my team currently using JSON. You can't use JSON with player prefs, right? It's not possible. Now, there is another way, okay? I want to also talk about ways outside of Unity. You could use a database, okay, that you can connect to. That is definitely another way to do it. And there are some great serverless databases you can use. One of them is called Firebase, right? So Firebase is a very popular way of connecting with any kind of mobile device. And if we look at the console for a second, let's actually go to Docs. So when it comes to using Firebase, there's different kinds of guides that you can use, right? And if I go to my console here, just for a second, let's suppose I have an example of docs. Firebase projects are available for Android, iOS, for the web, for C++, for a bunch of other stuff. And you can connect them to anything you want, as an example. So you can go to Docs, and under the docs, you can look at any kind of build that you want. For example, add Firebase to C++, or let's go add Firebase to Unity. Firebase is a free, kind of a serverless database that's available for you on Google Cloud Platform, which is pretty cool, right? Liam says you can't use JSON, not even converting the serialized class or string and saving that string to a pref. Yes, you could. Yes. But again, at the end of the day, it's got to be a player pref if you're going to save it locally. Because remember, guys, that we have to really be cognizant of that when you're saving something on a device, that it cannot be saved as a JSON file, not with Unity, right? There's no guarantee that it's not going to be overwritten, is all I'm saying, right? That's why you use player prefs. There are other things, and I recommend something like a database, which is offline. Now, you have to be connected to the internet for this. You have to have the persistent data connection. But again, it's fairly straightforward. It talks about how it works for both Android and iOS, if you're interested, and it leads you through a step-by-step tutorial about how to add Firebase to your project. Okay, so I think it's really great, and it talks about how to do it, and you really can't go wrong in terms of using this, because the way Firebase works is you use a JSON-like syntax to store your data, and you can have it's not really, there's not a lot of limitations on how this can work. Even when you start off, as an example, and you want to save your data on using Unity, I mean, you have quite a bit of space that comes for free on Firebase, and there's nothing for you to do, right? Other packages you can use, you can make your own connections to something like MongoDB, another serverless database, right? MongoDB is another way of doing it, where you can store objects that are very JSON-like. That's another way of doing things. Again, this is not using anything to do with multiplayer, but using some kind of database on the back end. And the reason why these serverless databases or NoSQL databases are useful is because, let's face it, how many times do you have to do some kind of relational database, kind of connect to a relational database for relational data from a game? And the answer is probably never, right? So that's why this kind of works great. Right, so again, there's some great interfaces for C#, as well as for, if you're making a desktop app, this can work great. The biggest problem is when it converts, when you're converting your app so it works with Android and iOS, that is the challenge. How do you make it work so that you can use Unity with something like a MongoDB or some other database, and when you convert the script to JavaScript, or you convert the script to something that works on Android or iOS, it still works. That's the challenge, right? Because it may not work. But yeah, Liam, you can use JSON, JSON data temporarily, like locally, like while you're playing, and then you can push it to a string pref later on. But then if you're going to do that, you might as well use scriptable objects, because they're very easy to use. Any other questions around this, around saving and loading data and how to do that? Oh, one more thing about saving and loading data is images. How about images? How about other stuff that you want to store? Sometimes people store, there's a lot of things to store in when it comes to game state. I want to save my game, but I want to create these save slots, like I said, right? So you could do a lot of things when it comes to save slots. What if I want to go back to a previous state? I should be able to load any state that I want by going back to that previous state to load it. And it should be, when I go back there, my player is reset to a specific position. My enemies, whatever enemies are on the level, are reset. And it could be very level specific, because you're saving a lot of different things that are on the level, anything that's inside of the game itself. So level-wise, it might be very unique, what you're saving in your player prefs or in a database. Okay, any other questions around this? Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining me today for this lecture. We'll get together on, Michael, you have a question?
Yeah, just not about, just about.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah, key mapping, left-hand, right-hand support is fine, because then it gives you different kind of options, right? So Herman had asked a question too about this. Other saving and loading methods, as long as it works on mobile and WebGL? Yes, because you should be able to have a WebGL fallback, Herman. What are you thinking? What other loading and saving methods will work guaranteed on Android and iOS? Do you know of them? Because that's the question. Yeah, I mean, again, just please, okay, I'm gonna put that up. So application persistent data path. Let's go there. So let's take a look at application persistent data path and see the difference between this and player prefs. So, okay, so it actually allows you to do it as well. And when you use the persistent data path for WebGL, I know that it had a bit of an issue. So it says MD5 hash of the data path. And one of the biggest problems with WebGL, for example, was when you save it locally on using WebGL, there is no server. It's still JavaScript, right? So a lot of times this will block you from doing it. Now, when it comes to iOS and Android, that could work. I believe it works no problem because you're actually saving physically to your device. But the biggest problem is this. So sometimes you have to use a combination of. Honestly, I haven't had a lot of success with this when it comes to WebGL, in my opinion, but maybe you have. Because where is that being saved? Look, it says IDBFS, points to IDBFS with an MD5 hash of the data path, right? But where is that actually being stored? That's the question. Okay, if it works for you, Herman, I'm good, right? So it doesn't matter to me how you do it, but I'm going to recommend player prefs. Player prefs, for the most part, work very, very consistently. And when you save it, when you're using application persistent data path, what kinds of data are you storing? Is it a JSON file? Is that what you're doing? JSON data? Because again, you have to serialize and deserialize no matter what you do, right? Serializing means encrypting it, or sorry, putting it together in a way that makes sense to you as a developer, so that you're kind of putting it together. Binary formatter, okay, and you can, and it's available to you, and you can load it from. Wow, that's awesome! If you can serialize the entire class, that's awesome. Like an object, you mean? That's great. And so I learn something new every day. That's awesome. Because typically what I heard of is that you couldn't do it consistently. That was the biggest issue with it. That's why we've used player preferences for years. But that's great. Thank you for that. And when you serialize the entire class, you serialize basically you made a class for the level. What did you do? Just curious. Maybe you made a saving and loading thing. Okay, so primitive data types. All right, similar to what we're talking about here. Again, it's totally up to you. One great thing about using a database like Firebase, which again is another option, is when we come to the multiplayer aspect, or when you're playing with friends and they want to see your status or those kind of things, or kind of you want to send messages across from one person to the other, as an example, using something like a database, something like, how Elden Ring kind of saves messages in the game world. That's pretty cool. You can do that too. You can do it with something like a database like this. Okay, so, all right, that's it. That's great. It's always good to have more than one option when it comes to saving and loading. My only concern is when you try and save data and to a device, and for different platforms, how it's going to work. Is it going to still work across different platforms? That's a major thing for me. But if it works for you, it makes me happy. No problem. That's great. Okay. Any other questions before we go for the day? Because we're kind of over time by about 5 minutes.
I have one last question.
Yeah, Michael.
I had trouble submitting the lab.
Okay. Did you say you sent me a note on that, right?
Yeah, I sent you an email.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about it.
I got it. Yep. Yeah, I will get to that. I've just wanted to make everyone up to date for today, and then I'm going to go through and backdate everything else that needs to be updated. So bear with me. I will get to that.
Okay. I just wanted to also have a quick question. Is there a reason why the labs are not resubmittable? If you submitted it early, you're not able to resubmit?
Oh no, that should be you should be able to submit as many times as possible. So it could be an error on my part.
Yeah, okay. Because I know when I first submitted the lab, I noticed I forgot to submit the video, but I just never. There's no resubmit button, so I never.
No, they should always. You should always have a chance to submit as often as you want. Usually, it might just been an oversight, like lacking the unlimited attempts click.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, great. Anyone else? If there's nothing else, guys, thank you so much, and I'll see you all on Thursday. One more thing before we run away. Before you go, sorry, one more thing since we're here. Please don't forget, we talked about this kind of at the last few weeks ago. There is the Ubisoft UbiNext Toronto Challenge that's coming out at the end of the week. For those people who are interested in getting an internship with Ubisoft, this is a great opportunity for you guys to work at a AAA studio. Again, I highly recommend taking a look at this from a timeline perspective. This Friday, March 11th, across the entire weekend till March 13th, as an example, there is the Ubisoft Challenge. If you are interested, one thing I wanted to mention, because your alpha release, right, as an example, is due this weekend. If your team is interested in doing this, I will give you an extension. So I wanted to mention that, right? If your team is actually going to compete, so I want to see that you've actually submitted your stuff, I will provide an extension for those people who are going to compete. Okay, so that's what I wanted to do, just to make sure that I give you that opportunity, because I'm telling you that it's due, and then I'm giving you this project that's due on Sunday. And I know you need as much time as possible to get this done. I will provide an extension for those people who need it. Okay? Otherwise, that's it for me, guys, and I'll see you on Thursday. Thank you so much. All right, take care.